The numbers on the quarterly report blurred together as Daniel Harper rubbed his temples, the fluorescent lights of his corner office doing nothing for the migraine building behind his eyes. 23 years with the firm, 19 years married, and lately it all felt like one long, exhausting marathon with no finish line in sight. He closed his laptop with more force than necessary, gathered his things, and headed home to Melissa. The drive through suburban Charlotte took its usual 40 minutes, giving him time to decompress from another day of hostile acquisitions and corporate warfare. The irony wasn't lost on him that he spent his days dismantling companies while trying to hold his marriage together. For the past 3 months, Melissa had been distant, turning away from his touch, claiming exhaustion, scheduling more girls' nights than their entire previous year combined. He found her in the living room, sitting perfectly postured on their leather sofa, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a job interview. The sight stopped him cold. In 19 years, he'd never seen her positioned quite like this. Calculated, prepared. "We need to talk," she announced, and Daniel felt his stomach drop. Those 4 words never preceded anything good. He set down his briefcase slowly, loosened his tie, and sat in the chair across from her rather than beside her on the couch. Some primitive instinct told him to maintain distance. "About?" he asked carefully. "About us. About our marriage," she responded, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, a nervous tell he'd noticed on their first date. "I've been thinking, and I want you to hear me out completely before you respond." Daniel nodded, his body tensing like it did before particularly brutal negotiations. "I think we should consider opening our marriage," she said, the words hanging in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Daniel stared at his wife. This woman who'd worn white at their church wedding, who'd cried during their vows, who'd built a life with him on foundations of monogamy and trust, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. "My friend Jennifer and her husband have been doing it for 2 years," Melissa continued rapidly, her words coming faster now, clearly rehearsed. "They say it's actually strengthened their marriage. We could have rules, boundaries. It doesn't mean we don't love each other." "Pack your bags and get out," he interrupted, his voice deadly calm. The 6 words came out measured, each one dropping like a stone into still water. The color drained from Melissa's face so quickly Daniel thought she might faint. Her carefully prepared speech crumbled into panicked fragments. "Daniel, no. I didn't mean, it was just a suggestion. I thought we could discuss," she stammered desperately. "Get out," he repeated even more firmly. "Please," she cried out, tears streaming down her face now, real or performed. He couldn't tell anymore. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. It was stupid. Jennifer made it sound so normal, but I don't really want that. I don't. Please, can we just forget I said anything?" Daniel watched her performance with the detached interest of someone observing a business presentation. The tears, the trembling hands, the perfect timing of her emotional breakdown. Had she always been this calculated, or was he only now seeing clearly? "If you ever," he said slowly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "mention this again. If you ever suggest that I should share you with another man, this marriage is over. Am I perfectly clear?" "Yes," she sobbed in response, reaching for him. "Yes, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. A horrible mistake." He let her collapse against his chest, let her tears soak through his dress shirt, all while staring at the wall behind her head. His mind, trained by 2 decades of corporate strategy, was already working through the implications. You don't ask for permission to do something you haven't already considered, or already done. That night, Melissa fell asleep quickly, exhausted from her tears, curled on her side of their king-sized bed with her back to him. Daniel lay rigid beside her, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months, she'd been at the gym, or shopping with friends, or attending a book club that she never seemed to read for. He turned his head to study her sleeping face, still beautiful at 41, laugh lines that he used to trace with his finger, lips that had promised fidelity. In the darkness, with only the streetlight filtering through their curtains, he whispered to himself, "You wouldn't ask for permission if you weren't already taking it." The decision crystallized in that moment, sharp and clear as broken glass. By morning, he would know the truth about what his wife had really been doing. The methodical part of his brain, the part that had orchestrated dozens of corporate takeovers, began forming a plan. If Melissa had already betrayed him, she would learn that Daniel Harper didn't forgive, didn't forget, and most importantly, didn't lose. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to plan. Tomorrow, the investigation would begin. Daniel Harper arrived at his office at 7 a.m. sharp, an hour before his usual time. The building was nearly empty, just security and a few eager associates trying to make an impression. Perfect for what he needed to do. He closed his office door, pulled up his contacts, and found the number Jim Brennan from legal had given him 6 months ago, just in case. Back then, Daniel had laughed it off. His marriage was solid, unshakable. What a fool he'd been. Bennett Delroy answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly like he'd been smoking since birth. Delroy Investigations. Mr. Delroy, this is Daniel Harper. Jim Brennan referred me. I need your services, Daniel stated directly. Domestic? The investigator asked knowingly. Yes, Daniel confirmed. Can you meet today? Lunch? Delroy suggested. Noon, Jacobson Steakhouse. Private booth, Daniel replied. I'll be there, the investigator confirmed before hanging up. Daniel stared at his desk photo, him and Melissa in Santorini, 2 years ago, her laughing as the wind whipped her hair. He turned the frame face down. The morning crawled by in a blur of meetings and spreadsheets. Daniel's reputation for laser focus served him well. No one noticed his mind was elsewhere, calculating not profit margins, but the systematic dismantling of his marriage. Bennett Delroy looked exactly as his voice suggested. Late 50s, thick through the middle with the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. They sat in the booth's burgundy leather seats, menus untouched. Tell me what you need, Bennett said simply, pulling out a small notebook. Evidence of infidelity. My wife, Melissa Harper, Daniel explained, sliding across a manila folder he'd prepared. Melissa's photo, her license plate, her daily schedule, her favorite coffee shops and stores. She's been distant for 3 months. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she's supposedly at various activities. I need to know where she really is. Bennett studied the information with professional detachment. Timeline? He inquired. As soon as possible, Daniel answered firmly. My rate is, Bennett began. I don't care about the cost. I care about thoroughness and discretion, Daniel interrupted. Bennett nodded, pocketing the folder. You'll hear from me within 72 hours. Maybe sooner if she's as predictable as this schedule suggests, he assured his client. Walking back to his office, Daniel felt oddly calm. The waiting would be the hardest part, but he'd endured hostile takeover attempts that dragged on for months. He could manage 3 days of pretending everything was normal. That evening, Melissa had prepared his favorite meal, ribeye with roasted vegetables, a Caesar salad, good wine. The effort would have touched him a week ago. Now it felt like manipulation, each gesture calculated to erase her mistake from the previous night. How was your day? She asked tentatively, cutting her steak into precise small pieces. Productive. Close the Garrison deal, he responded evenly, taking a sip of wine, noting how she wouldn't meet his eyes. You? Oh, you know. Errands, cleaned the house. Jennifer called, she replied, then paused, perhaps realizing the minefield that name represented. About the charity auction next month. He acknowledged non-committally. They ate in relative silence, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the grandfather clock in the hallway. Daniel studied her with new eyes, the way she checked her phone every few minutes, how she'd styled her hair more carefully than usual for a day of errands, the new perfume he didn't recognize. Thursday came with agonizing slowness. That evening, Melissa announced she was going to her book club. What are you reading? Daniel asked casually, not looking up from his laptop. Oh, it's a mystery novel. You wouldn't like it, she deflected nervously. Try me, he pressed. The Girl on the Train. It's about a woman who... It's complicated, she answered vaguely. Daniel knew that book. It had come out years ago. No book club would be reading it now. Enjoy, he said simply. She kissed his cheek. quick, perfunctory, and left in a cloud of that new perfume. His phone buzzed 2 hours. Later, Bennett, she's at the Riverside, in off Highway 40, room 237. Checked in 40 minutes ago with a white male, approximately 45, driving a blue BMW, license plate TMW 429. I have photos, the investigator reported. Daniel's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. Send everything you have, he demanded. The email arrived 30 seconds later. Daniel opened it on his laptop, each image loading like a punch to the stomach. Melissa entering the hotel. Melissa in the hallway. Melissa kissing a man he didn't recognize. Passionate, desperate, nothing like the pecks she'd been giving Daniel for months. Timestamps showed this was their regular Thursday routine. The last email contained the man's identity. Trevor Walsh, married, 2 children, marketing director at Davidson Industries. Home address included. Wife's name, Sarah. Daniel stared at the photos for a long time, waiting to feel rage or heartbreak. Instead, he felt only cold clarity. Melissa hadn't just betrayed him, she'd participated in destroying another family. The moral woman who'd insisted on a church wedding was having intimacy with another woman's husband in a cheap hotel room. He closed the laptop, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, and began planning his next move. The evidence was damning, comprehensive, irrefutable. But Daniel hadn't built his career on half measures. If he was going to destroy his marriage, he'd do it completely, strategically, and with maximum impact. Trevor Walsh had a wife who deserved to know the truth. And maybe, just maybe, she'd want to be part of the solution. Daniel picked up Trevor's business card, obtained by Bennett's thorough investigation, and realized he had a choice: handle this alone, or forge an alliance with another victim who didn't even know she'd been betrayed. The strategic part of his mind already knew the answer. In any war, allies made victory not just possible, but devastating. Daniel spent Friday morning researching Sarah Walsh with the same thoroughness he applied to hostile takeovers. LinkedIn revealed a pediatric nurse at Charlotte Presbyterian, 15 years of experience, numerous professional commendations. Facebook showed a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes, 2 children, a boy around 12, a girl maybe 10, and a husband who appeared in progressively fewer photos over recent months. Her latest posts were about single parenting struggles while her husband worked late. The irony was bitter. The question was how to approach her. Cold call? Email? Show up at her work? Each option felt cruel in its own way. Finally, Daniel settled on directness, the same approach he'd want if positions were reversed. He called from his office landline at lunch when she'd likely be between shifts. Hello? Came a tired but pleasant voice. Mrs. Walsh? Sarah Walsh? He asked carefully. Yes? If this is about the hospital fundraiser, she began. No, Mrs. Walsh, my name is Daniel Harper. You don't know me, but I have information about your husband that you need to see, he explained gently. Silence. Then, carefully. What kind of information? She asked warily. The kind that shouldn't be discussed over the phone. Could we meet? Today, if possible. Somewhere public, anywhere you're comfortable, he suggested. I don't understand. Is Trevor in trouble? She asked, confusion evident in her voice. Daniel closed his eyes. Mrs. Walsh, I realize this is strange and unsettling. I promise I'm not a threat to you or your family, but you need to see what I have. Please, he said earnestly, a long pause. Brennan's Cafe on 3rd Street. 4 o'clock. I'll be in Scrubs, she finally agreed. Thank you. And Mrs. Walsh, I'm sorry, he added softly. He heard her sharp intake of breath before she hung up. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table with a view of the door. The cafe was quiet, too late for lunch, too early for dinner. Perfect for destroying someone's world as gently as possible. Sarah Walsh walked in at exactly 4 o'clock, still in her pediatric scrubs covered with cartoon characters. She was prettier than her photos, auburn hair pulled back, green eyes that swept the room before landing on him. The wariness in her expression made his chest tight. Mr. Harper? She asked tentatively. He stood, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thank you for coming. Can I get you coffee? Tea? He offered. Just tell me, she demanded, sitting rigid, hands clasped. Whatever it is, just tell me. Daniel pulled out the manila envelope, the same one Bennett had given him, minus his own wife's solo shots. "Your husband is having an affair. I know because the woman is my wife," he stated directly. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, then a dawning horror as he laid out the photos. Trevor entering the hotel. Trevor with Melissa. The kiss in the parking lot. The timestamp showing this week. Last week? The week before? "No," she whispered, but her eyes said she believed it. "He said he was working on the Davidson campaign. Late meetings with clients," she explained weakly. "Every Tuesday and Thursday at the Riverside Inn, room 237, he confirmed. Sarah's hands shook as she picked up one photo. The kiss. "That's your wife?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Melissa, married 19 years, Daniel confirmed, his voice steady, businesslike. "She asked me this week if we could have an open marriage. That's what prompted my investigation," Sarah laughed, sharp, bitter. "Trevor's been distant for months. I thought it was stress. The kids barely see him anymore," she shared, her eyes filling with tears that she refused to let fall. "How long?" 3 months, as far as I can prove. "Maybe longer," he answered honestly. She studied the photos again, this time with clinical detachment. "You hired someone. A professional," she observed. "Bennett Delroy. He's thorough," Daniel confirmed. "I want copies of everything," she stated firmly. "Already done," he replied, pulling out a second envelope. "Every photo, every timestamp, even the hotel receipts he somehow obtained." Sarah took the envelope, held it like it might explode. "Why did you contact me?" "You could have just divorced her quietly," she questioned. "Because you deserved to know. And because—" Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "I believe in consequences. Real ones. If we do this separately, they might find ways to minimize the damage, spin stories, play victim. Together we control the narrative," Sarah finished. Her nurse training showing, crisis mode engaging, practical thoughts overriding emotional chaos. "You're talking about coordinated action." "I'm talking about justice," he clarified. She met his eyes then, really looked at him for the first time. "You're angry," she observed, "aren't you?" He countered. "I'm furious," she admitted, the words coming out calm, controlled, ice cold. "Trevor handles all our finances. I don't even know what we have. What he's hidden. I've been raising our children alone while he was—" She stopped, jaw clenched. "I know a lawyer. A good one. We could meet with him together. Make sure neither of them can coordinate their stories or hide assets," he proposed. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photo of the kiss. "My children. This will destroy them," she said softly. "It will hurt them, but living a lie destroys them slower, subtler. They deserve a mother who isn't being betrayed, a life built on truth," he reasoned gently. "You don't have children?" she asked. "No, Melissa couldn't. We tried for years," he shared, the irony tasting bitter. "Apparently she found other ways to fill her time." Sarah's laugh was dark. "A pediatric nurse who wanted more children and a woman who couldn't have them. They certainly picked their victims well," she noted bitterly. "They picked wrong," he corrected firmly. Something shifted in Sarah's expression, the shock giving way to determination. "When do we see this lawyer?" she asked decisively. "Monday, if you can manage it." 9 a.m. "Brennan, Kowalski, and Associates," he informed her. "I'll be there," she confirmed, gathering the photos, slipping them back into the envelope with steady hands. "What about confronting them?" "Together. Same time, same evening. They can't warn each other if they're both ambushed simultaneously," he explained strategically. Sarah nodded slowly. "You've thought this through," she observed. "It's what I do. Corporate takeovers, hostile acquisitions. This is just another negotiation where I hold all the cards," he explained. "And I'm your strategic partner," she understood. "If you're willing," he confirmed. She stood, tucking the envelope into her bag. "Mr. Harper," she began. "Daniel," he corrected. "Daniel," she continued. "They made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" he asked. "They assumed we were too comfortable, too trusting, too weak to fight back," she explained with a sharp smile, surgical steel in her voice. "Let's show them what clever really looks like." As she walked out, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced since seeing those photos. Not quite hope, but something like it. Partnership, purpose, the understanding that revenge, properly executed, could be a work of art. His phone buzzed. "Melissa, asking what he wanted for dinner?" "Surprise me," he texted back, knowing that in just a few days he'd be returning the favor. Tuesday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for October, the kind of Indian summer day that made Charlotte feel almost tropical. Daniel drove home with the windows down, classical music playing softly, Vivaldi's, Four Seasons, ironically on. Spring, when everything in his life was about to enter the deepest winter. The lawyer meeting with Sarah yesterday had been illuminating. Jim Brennan had rarely seen such a well-documented case, or such coordinated plaintiffs. The papers were drawn up, the strategy set. Tonight at 7:30 p.m. exactly, 2 marriages would end. Daniel pulled into his driveway at 6:47, noting Melissa's car already there. Good. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and garlic. She was making his favorite chicken dish. The effort might have been touching if he didn't know she'd spent the afternoon at the Riverside Inn with Trevor Walsh. "You're home early," Melissa called from the kitchen, voice bright and false. "Wrapped up the Peterson acquisition ahead of schedule," he responded casually, setting his briefcase on the hall table, the weight of the divorce papers inside it heavy as stones. "Smells good. I wanted to do something nice." "We've been—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "Distant lately. I thought we could talk, really talk. Maybe open a good bottle of wine?" she suggested hopefully. The irony was almost unbearable. "Sounds perfect," he agreed. Daniel went upstairs, changed into jeans and a polo shirt, casual clothes for dropping bombs, and took his time. In the mirror, he looked older than his 44 years. When had those lines around his eyes gotten so deep? When had his hair gone more salt than pepper? 3 months ago, probably, when his wife had started Trevor Walsh. At 7:15, he came downstairs to find the dining room set with their wedding china, candles lit, soft jazz playing. Melissa had changed into a dress he'd bought her for their anniversary, blue silk that brought out her eyes. She'd tried harder tonight than she had in months. "Wine," she offered, holding up a bottle of the Bordeaux they'd been saving for a special occasion. "Please," he accepted. They sat across from each other, the same positions as that night she'd asked for an open marriage. Melissa served the chicken, chattering nervously about grocery store prices, the neighbor's new dog, anything but the truth between them. Daniel ate mechanically, tasting nothing, watching the clock above her head. 7:27, "Melissa," he interrupted her nervous chatter, "I was thinking we could go away next weekend. Maybe the mountains? That little bed and breakfast we liked," she continued desperately. "Melissa," he repeated more firmly. Something in his tone stopped her. She set down her fork, hands trembling slightly. 29. Daniel reached down to his briefcase, pulled out the manila envelope, and placed it on the table between them. "What's this?" she asked, her voice small, already knowing. "Open it," he commanded. 30. Her fingers fumbled with the clasped envelope. The first photo slid out, her entering the Riverside Inn. The blood drained from her face so fast, Daniel thought she might faint. The second photo, her and Trevor in the hallway. The third, the kiss. "Daniel, she started weakly. "Keep going," he ordered. She spread them all out, a timeline of betrayal across their wedding china. The silence stretched, broken only by the jazz neither of them would ever be able to listen to again. "I didn't do anything, Daniel. I only asked about an open relationship," she tried desperately. "I know about Trevor Walsh," he stated conversationally, his voice calm. "And Sarah Walsh knows about you. She's showing him these same pictures right now." Melissa's gasp was theatrical, but the horror that followed was real. "You contacted his wife?" she asked in disbelief. "We had coffee. Lovely woman. Pediatric nurse. Loves her children. Didn't deserve what you two did to her," he explained matter-of-factly. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Done. He's not taking it well." She just confronted him, Daniel informed Melissa, whose hands had started shaking violently. "So calling him for comfort or coordination isn't an option." The tears came then, real, ugly, desperate tears. "Daniel, please. It didn't mean anything." It was a mistake. I was lonely. You were always working, she pleaded. For us. I was working for us. For this house you're sitting in, the car you drive, the life you've lived for 19 years without contributing a single paycheck, he countered coldly. That's not fair. I supported your career. I made a home, she protested. And then you brought another man into it. Another woman's husband, he cut her off. Melissa's sobs grew harder. Please, I'll end it. I'll never see him again. We can go to counseling. We can, she begged. The divorce papers are in the envelope. I've already filed. Jim Brennan is my attorney. You might want to get your own. Though I should mention, the evidence is overwhelming and the prenup you signed is ironclad, he informed her coldly. She looked up, mascara running, looking older than her 41 years. Prenup? We don't have a, she said confused. We do. You signed it the week before our wedding. You were so in love, so trusting, you never read it carefully. Infidelity clause. You get nothing but what the state mandates, he explained. You tricked me, she accused. No, I protected myself. Something you should have considered before having intimacy with Trevor Walsh, he responded bluntly. The vulgarity hit her like a slap. Daniel never cursed, never raised his voice. This cold recitation of facts was worse than screaming. 20 years, Daniel. Doesn't that mean anything? She pleaded desperately. You already answered that question when you decided our marriage was worth less than Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at a cheap hotel, he answered simply. Melissa stood unsteadily, wine glass tipping, red spreading across white tablecloth like blood. Where am I supposed to go? She asked frantically. I don't care. Your sisters. A friend's. Maybe Jennifer, the one who gave you such excellent advice about open marriages. But you need to leave. Tonight, he stated firmly. This is my home, she protested. This is my house. Check the deed, he corrected. Another text from Sarah. He's packing, crying like a child. His kids won't even look at him. Daniel stood, walked to the door. I'll be in my office for the next hour. When I come out, you need to be gone. Take what you can carry tonight. We'll arrange for the rest later, through lawyers, he instructed. Daniel, please, she begged one last time. 1 hour? Melissa, he said with finality. He closed his office door on her sobs, poured himself a scotch, and sat in his leather chair. Through the door, he could hear her moving around. Drawers slamming, more crying, a phone call, probably to her sister from the half of the conversation he caught. 53 minutes later, the front door slammed. Daniel emerged to find the dining room still set for romance. Candles burning down, jazz playing to an empty room, divorce papers scattered among the china. He turned off the music, blew out the candles, and began clearing the table. His phone rang. Sarah. He's gone, she said simply. Her too, he confirmed. The kids are devastated, but they're angry at him, not me. That helps, she shared. I'm sorry about your children, he offered sincerely. They're strong, like their mother apparently, she replied with a pause. Thank you, Daniel, for telling me. For everything. We're not done yet. There will be mediation, asset division, paperwork, he reminded her. I know. But the hardest part, the revelation, the confrontation, that's over, she acknowledged. Standing in his empty house for the first time in 20 years, Daniel felt something he hadn't expected. Relief. Not happiness, not yet, but the bone-deep relief of excising a cancer, of ending a lie, of choosing truth even when it hurt. Sarah, would you and the kids like to come for dinner this weekend? Nothing romantic, just company. People who understand, he offered. Her laugh was watery but genuine. That sounds nice. The kids love pizza, she accepted. Pizza it is, he confirmed. After they hung up, Daniel looked around his empty house, truly his for the first time. The silence was different now. Not lonely, but peaceful. Honest. He poured himself another scotch, sat in his favorite chair, and for the first time in months, felt like he could actually breathe. The February sun streamed through the windows of Daniel's home office, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors he'd had refinished after Melissa left. 6 months had passed since the night of revelation, and the house barely resembled the museum of their marriage it had once been. The wedding china was donated, the formal dining room converted to a library, and the walls now held art he'd chosen himself. Bold, Modern pieces Melissa would have hated. The doorbell rang, 3 short bursts followed by 2 long ones. Morse code for S. "It's open, Sarah," he called out, not looking up from his laptop. She entered carrying 2 coffee cups, setting one beside him. "You really should lock your door. This is Charlotte, not Mayberry," she chided gently. "Says the woman who just walked into my unlocked house," he countered with amusement. She laughed, settling into the chair across from his desk, her chair unofficially. They'd developed this Saturday morning routine over the months, comparing notes on lawyer meetings, discussing strategies, and somehow becoming actual friends in the process. "Trevor called again last night," she mentioned, sipping her coffee. "Wants to know if I've reconsidered." "And?" he prompted. "I told him I had reconsidered. Reconsidered ever marrying him in the first place," she replied with dark satisfaction. Daniel smiled. Sarah's wit had sharpened considerably since October, her humor darker but somehow brighter, too. Melissa sent another email. "Apparently I've ruined her life," he shared. "The horror, consequences for her actions. How unprecedented," she responded sarcastically. They sat in comfortable silence, a shared understanding between 2 people who'd had their worlds shattered and chosen to rebuild rather than remain in the rubble. The divorces had been finalized last month, both relatively clean given the overwhelming evidence. Melissa got the minimum required by law. Trevor lost half of everything, plus substantial child support. Neither cheater had contested much once they realized the futility. "The kids are doing better," Sarah offered. David actually smiled at breakfast. "First time in weeks." "They're lucky to have you," he said sincerely. "They're lucky their father's bull got exposed before it did permanent damage," she corrected. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Bennett Delroy, the PI who'd started everything. "Saw your ex at Riverside Inn yesterday." Different guy. Some people never learn. He showed it to Sarah, who shook her head. 6 months. "That's all it took for her to go back to the same hotel?" she asked incredulously. "Trevor?" he inquired. "Living in a studio apartment, from what my lawyer says. Dating some 25-year-old from his office who doesn't know any better. Yet," she informed him. "They deserved each other," he observed. "They really did," she agreed. Sarah stood, walking to the window that overlooked the backyard. "You know what's strange? I'm grateful it happened," she reflected. Daniel joined her at the window. "Grateful?" he questioned. "Not for the betrayal, but for the revelation. I was sleepwalking through my life, accepting scraps of affection, making excuses for obvious lies. Now I'm awake. My kids see me actually happy. That's worth something," she explained thoughtfully. "I know what you mean. The last 3 months with Melissa, I was dying slowly. Suspicious, paranoid, but paralyzed. Now," he trailed off. "Now you're free," she finished for him. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching clouds drift across the Carolina sky. Not touching, not romantic, but connected by something deeper, shared survival, mutual respect, the understanding that came from parallel devastation and recovery. "The kids and I are going to the lake house next weekend," Sarah mentioned. "You should come." "David wants to learn to fish, and I know nothing about it." "I haven't fished in years," he admitted. "Perfect. You can teach badly together," she suggested with a smile. "Sounds nice," he accepted. Sarah's phone rang, her daughter needing a ride from soccer practice. "I should go." "But Daniel?" She paused at the door. "That night you called me, told me the truth? You saved my life. Not dramatically, but actually. You saved me from years more of lies. You saved mine, too. The Alliance, remember?" he reminded her. "The Alliance," she agreed, and left with a wave. Daniel returned to his desk, to the acquisition proposal he'd been reviewing. His phone lit up with another message from Melissa, a long, rambling text about forgiveness and second chances. He deleted it without reading past the first line. Some doors, once closed, were meant to stay that way, but others... He thought of Sarah's invitation, of her kids who'd started calling him Uncle Daniel, of Saturday morning coffees and shared laughter, over mutual war stories. Some doors opened onto unexpected possibilities. The house was quiet but not empty. The silence was peaceful, not lonely. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Daniel Harper was exactly where he wanted to be. Free, honest, and surrounded by people who actually deserved his trust. The open marriage Melissa had wanted had indeed come to pass, just not in any way she'd imagined. Open-ended, open to possibility, open to a future built on truth rather than lies. And that, Daniel thought as he closed his laptop and grabbed his car keys to go shopping for fishing gear, was the best revenge of all. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.